Good afternoon, Council and interested members of the public. Welcome to the afternoon session for our special Valentine's Day Council meeting. Hopefully we are all out of here in time to, stay at home and have a nice dinner, because that's what we're doing these days. Order in from a nice Waterloo restaurant. I think they would really appreciate the support in the business today. We'll start with a roll call, starting with Ward 1.
Good afternoon, everyone. Councillor Hanmer present.
Councillor Bodley present.
Councillor Veith present.
Councillor Freeman present.
Councillor Vasic present.
Mayor Dave Jaworski here.
And Councillor Henry here in the chair. That is all of us. I will begin with a territorial acknowledgement. We would like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which we are broadcasting from today, and many of us are gathering on, is the land traditionally cared for by the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and Neutral people. We also acknowledge the enduring presence and deep traditional knowledge and philosophies of the Indigenous people with whom we share this land today. We also begin our council meetings with a moment of reflection. At the beginning of this council meeting, we pause to think about the needs of our community. May we show wisdom and compassion in all our decisions. Taking these two together, I think it's important to acknowledge the history and reasons for making both of these statements and acknowledgements at the beginning of a meeting. Traditionally, the chair welcomes people into the territory and the space on which they're offered, into the table on which we have important conversations about the needs of our community and the direction that we are going to take. These traditions of the first peoples who are here on this land and those that came to settle after are different in many ways, but they row in the same direction with this respect. That it's important to acknowledge where we are, the needs of the people that we serve, to hear the voices of the people who have these needs and these concerns, and to make thoughtful decisions, compassionate decisions together, and with consideration of all of those issues, to be able to move forward to create stronger communities for all of us. And the definition of all of us is so important that we keep broadening that, and we acknowledge the wrongs that we've had in the past and the rights that we can create together in a shared purpose, in a shared future, by listening and acknowledging and recognizing the different histories and traditions and the views and needs of everybody who is in our community and who has been part of these lands and this space. We care for them together, and we have a stronger community because of it. So with those, I want to first turn to the Deputy Clerk, as we have a more unusual item and procedural matter that goes along with it to deal with it before we get on to the printed agenda. Just a moment as we switch sound.
Chair and members of council, on Friday, February 11th, the clerk's office has received a delegation request on a non-agenda item regarding the street light installation project on Ferndale Place. As the agenda was already distributed and public notice was provided, we would look to council to consider the delegation request. If approved by majority vote of council, the delegation will be invited to speak. There are 3 members of the delegation: Matthew Wilson, Susan Raymond, and Brian Hughes. They could be permitted to speak for a maximum of 10 minutes shared, or a less amount if council chose so. Thank you.
Thank you, Natalia. So having heard that there's another matter for us to consider as part of this agenda, I will look first to council for any disclosure of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof. I know there was one.
Through you, Chair.
Go ahead,
It's Councillor Freeman. I have a declaration.
Please go ahead.
It's with regard to agenda item 10A, zoning bylaw amendment Z-21-12 for 535 Quiet Place, Hickory Terraces Limited. I have a conflict as it relates to my place of employment.
Thank you, Councillor Freeman. That has been noted. Seeing and hearing no further disclosures of pecuniary interest, we'll return back to the matter of the proposed delegation. We would need a motion from council to consider that delegation at this time. I see that we do have a mover. Is there a seconder for hearing from these delegations? This delegation is laid out by the Deputy Clerk, seconded by Mayor Jaworski. Sorry, moved by Councillor Vasic and seconded by Mayor Jaworski. Is there any discussion on the motion before I take the vote? I see questions, so we'll start with Councillor Hammer.
Thank you, Chair. Just to be clear, we are voting to hear the delegation for as a group of 3, one delegation for 10 minutes. Is that correct?
That was what I heard, and I'd look for, if the mover and seconder intended to move something different than that, please let me know if that's what you did now. I'm not seeing anything, so yes, Councillor Hanmer, that is the motion on the floor. Are there any other questions? Seeing none, we'll begin the vote on the motion to hear the delegation for up to 10 minutes on starting with Ward 1.
Councillor Hanmer in favor.
Councillor Bodley in favor.
Councillor Veith opposed. Councillor Vasic in favor. Oh, sorry, Councillor Freeman.
So good. Councillor Freeman in favor.
Mayor Jaworski in favor.
And the chair is in favor as well. That carries with one voting opposed, Councillor Veith, which is noted. So we will be able to then proceed to hear from the delegation. Is that something we will get ready to do now? Yes, I'm seeing that nodded. So just bear with us as we get microphones set out and the delegation ready to speak. Okay, I believe Mr. Wilson, Matthew, you are up. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Mayor, honorable city councilors, fellow delegates, attendees. My name is Matthew Wilson, and it's my pleasure to advocate today on behalf of the residents of Ferndale Place. A little over 3 years ago, I set myself an unusual and ambitious goal to walk every block of every street in Kitchener-Waterloo in a year. I accomplished my task in just over 11 months, and I was humbled to have my story featured on the front page of the Waterloo Region Record and on 570 News. Throughout the course of my walking, I was often asked about my favorite street in the city. My answer was always Ferndale Place. Ferndale is a charming cul-de-sac in the Lincoln Heights area of Waterloo, nestled against sprawling hillside park. It has gorgeous old homes, mature trees, and in particular, an elegant set of streetlights that are like few others in the city. Ferndale is a true hidden gem in our community, and I've returned to it often. So I was surprised and disappointed when Susan Raymond, a resident of the street, reached out to me to say that the city of Waterloo had decided to remove those same charming lampposts that had made my Ferndale Place my favorite street in Kitchener-Waterloo. Susan had read the article about me in the Record, where I mentioned my love for Ferndale, and asked if I would lend my voice to the chorus of concerned residents who didn't want to see the charm of the street compromised. I was happy to oblige. Council, I've read your communication with the residents of Ferndale, and I understand that the lights are a potential safety concern. This needs to be addressed, and I want to emphasize that I'm in no way advocating for a solution that doesn't provide suitable, reliable lighting for the street. Citizen safety is the #1 concern in any matter of public infrastructure. Nevertheless, I believe there's a solution that can achieve the necessary safety outcome while also maintaining the existing aesthetic of Ferndale Place. Other neighborhoods in Kitchener-Waterloo use a style of light similar to what Ferndale has now. The Westmount neighborhood, for example, is notable for this style. I myself live in the Victoria Common Townhouse complex in Kitchener, which features Victorian-style metal streetlights with modern LED bulbs. These fixtures provide more than adequate light for our streets and are an eye-catching feature of one of the region's most distinctive new-build neighborhoods. Our delegation is calling for the City of Waterloo to retrofit or install a similar set of streetlights for Ferndale Place. This will address both the city's safety concerns and the residents' concerns about aesthetics. Council, we in the delegation recognize this is a small matter, but small matters make great cities. As someone who's seen literally everything of what Kitchener-Waterloo has to offer and proclaimed Ferndale the best of all, I know that it's the little things about our region that people appreciate. Since that article about me was published, I understand from Susan that Ferndale has become a very popular destination for walkers. People want to see what the fuss is about. I implore you to not take away what there is to see. Let's find a solution that maintains the charm of Ferndale Place while still keeping its residents safe. It's what this hidden gem deserves. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. It's Susan Raymond. It's my pleasure to speak on behalf of the residents of Ferndale Place. The city and our councillor consistently have brought up safety as the primary reason for this project. When pushed, our city councillor admitted there is no immediate safety issue. We appreciated her honesty. The city throws this safety up as a red herring. They throw up the condition of the light standards, yet offer them back to us. They are cast iron. They will outlive us all. We have experts saying the light standards aren't in bad shape and can be retrofitted to LED. These are accredited licensed professionals in the electrical field. We are on a list of aging infrastructure and none of us is arguing against this retrofit, which saves greenhouse gas emissions and will save maintenance. The real agenda here is to get these off the city's books as a maintenance item to the Waterloo North Hydro. Your own website makes that clear. These lights are an art installation. They provide joy to those who live here and those who come walk the street. They remind people of simpler times, something we all desperately need right now. This weekend, a walking group made a priority to come. Cars lined the street. Not having the exact details of what in the 1960s was a gentleman's agreement that we bought the lights and the city maintained them is irrelevant. We know from Indigenous history that stories are passed down and told. The lights have been here for 55 years, a fact. New owners all receive the same story, that we took the lights were taken down and the citizens on the street paid for them to be located here. The pieces of glass that have been passed down are real. We have them, not the city. The collections to repaint the posts and the painting of them at our expense actually happened. Ferndale Place is part of a unique development by Claude Dubrick. He recognized the significance of the environment on the land he was developing and left as much as possible of the original very mature forest. The tree canopy is so heavy on the west side of Ferndale that when viewed from Google Earth, you can barely see the houses. This canopy extends around the street and up to the next level of homes on Glenridge Place. There is no other environmental feature like this in Waterloo region than there is the houses backing Hillside. Hillside Park is the largest urban park system in Waterloo region and contains near old growth forest, significant sensitive wetlands, and the convergence of two creeks. It's the most environmentally significant parcel of land in all of urban region of Waterloo. Let me repeat that. Hillside Park is the most environmentally significant parcel of land in the urban region of Waterloo. Ambient light bleeding into a sensitive environment is recognized as a major destruction of natural habitat, especially for amphibians and birds. We have an abundance of both. These very harmful effects have been recognized in other cities, municipalities throughout Ontario, and have been incorporated into the best municipal practices in Hamilton and Toronto. The Royal Astronomical Society has done world-recognized work with the City of Hamilton to protect their parks and their natural rich environment. We want the kind of protection other municipalities are giving their sensitive environmental areas. These resources are available to you, Council. They would love to help you understand the impacts. The present lighting on Ferndale Place is appropriate for the health of Hillside Park. It is low intensity and the standards are short. If you walk the park at night, you observe where light bleeds into it, the highway and north of Lexington. The sections of the park that are darkest is the ridge behind Ferndale Place, where we find the most concentrations of amphibians and birds. The proposed new lights will be brighter, taller, and most disappointingly are on the wrong side of the street, casting light straight into the park. Any tree removal or trimming of the overhead tree canopy will allow more artificial into the park, making the problem of ambient lighting far worse. On nearby McGregor Crescent and Dale Crescents, lights were put on the side of the park facing the opposite side of the street. In Ontario, municipalities are encouraged to drop their lighting intensity around natural sensitive areas where street safety and wildlife protection can be accomplished. Indeed, for personal safety and reducing crime, studies show low lighting is much better. In this case, you're going to put in the wrong lights, impact an important tree canopy. You'll put the lights on the wrong side of the street, and it feels like the park, the wildlife, the trees are all just impediments in your operational goals. We have shown what other municipalities have as lighting best practices. The Royal Astronomical Society is a resource willing to talk to you. The City of Winnipeg found a compromise with residents over similar lights. If any of you want this information, just reach out and ask. Matthew, thank you for your great words. We can be proud of knowing we did everything we could in a time of pandemic to protect Hillside Park and preserve the cultural heritage of our street, part of the broader cultural heritage of Lincoln Heights. This project is just one on a list of many work projects. COVID was proof municipalities shift their priorities and address what has to be done and not what is operational when necessary. Mr. Mayor, honorable city councilors, we are asking for a 6-month delay so the city can take a breath, look at the significant resources we have researched and found, and how important it is to the environment that surrounds us. This is not just an aesthetics issue. This is an issue that is far greater than all of us. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much to the delegation. That was just in under 10 minutes. I appreciate it. I will look to council for any questions of the delegation. I'm seeing so far a question of staff. Looking to see if there are any questions from this delegation before I let them go. Seeing none, I wanted to say thank you for your detailed and for your detailed presentation. You raised certainly a number of points, and all I see that the council is going to be taking up a few questions with staff. So thank you very much, and you can please feel free to listen in on the conversation that ensues from all of this. Thank you for coming today. I know time was of the essence on this item. I'm going to go first to Councillor Vasic. If you wish to go now, or do you wish to go later? Okay, Mayor first. So Mayor Jaworski, I understand you have a question of staff, and then Councillor Vasic after that.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Chair, and through the Chair to Commissioner Ron Ormson. Certainly have been, we've been working on this project for quite some time, the LED lighting. I think it dates back to probably 2014. So some of my memory on that is a bit skimpy, but as I recall, I certainly think we would have implemented this on many hundreds of roads, if not thousands of roads throughout the region. As I recall, it was a regionally coordinated project. And I'm just, in looking at Ferndale Place, certainly we would have had a lot of observations on that and a lot of questions, and had a number of emails shared with me. that really seems to be that certainly city staff and Councillor Vasic have really dug into this over a past number of weeks. So as we look today to consider potentially giving some direction to staff to look at something new, I'm just wondering what has not been looked at yet, and maybe some commentary on the LED lighting.
Good afternoon, Mayor Jaworski, through Chair Henry to you. Yes, staff have worked very hard on this lighting project to make sure that we've looked at all the different parameters and angles that we have to consider. And to that end, we worked with Waterloo North Hydro staff, and we also retained our own electrical contractor who is an expert in decorative lighting. This particular contractor maintains the Uptown Waterloo decorative lighting. And really what we found here is basically a situation where these lights are 60 years old. The underground infrastructure is the key part of the problem here. As it currently stands, we would have trouble trying to address our due diligence obligations posed by the Electrical Safety Act and the Ontario Electrical Safety Code. And moreover, it is part of a logical extension of the street light replacement program that has been going on for several years, as you note. It does address regional standards for illumination. And those illumination policies require that there's cutoff luminaires that prevent the upward migration of light so that the LED lights are dark sky compliant, and the warm colored light emissions are directed downward at the road where they need to be, so there's no light pollution that are caused by these new LED lights. So in a nutshell, there was a lot of analysis that went into making sure that we came to the right conclusion on what needs to be done here on Ferndale Place.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Ormson, for the fulsome response.
I'm not seeing other questions from members of council. Councillor Vasic, would you like to go now?
Yeah, sure. Thanks through you, Chair. I'd like to thank the delegates for coming in and initially pushing in the first place to see if there were any heritage reasons to keep the lights. And I'd like to thank staff for looking into if there were any. I know City of Waterloo staff consulted with City of Kitchener staff to see if there was any written proof, and we couldn't find that. It's true. And so I would like to thank the residents for pushing so that we could delay it already about maybe a month and a half to see if there was a cultural heritage reason to keep it. And my position hasn't changed to the residents, and I'm sorry for that, and I know that you're disappointed in me. And as I said in our public meeting last week with city staff, the reasons why, including safety, including that this is a regional project, and I know there are streets with decorative lights as well, and there are reasons for that are different across the city and the region, but this is a big region-wide project that is being implemented operationally in lots of areas. And so we do have to make decisions about where to put our resources to change programs, and to change this program in the middle of a pandemic when resources are tight. And I mean that also in terms of staff resources, internal resources, to be able to completely upend an entire program. It's a real tough ask. And so I also know how much you love your street, and as somebody said at the meeting last week, your street has come together for this. So I have no doubt that if you wanted to work on other projects, community projects, if you'd like to work with me on those, I would be very happy to. And I will end by saying I am very sorry that I don't feel differently. I am glad that you delegated to see if maybe there was someone else who was missing something I missed. So thank you for coming, and I'm sorry I don't have a different answer for you today.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Vasic. Seeing no other hands up, we'll move on to item 8 on our meeting today. That's approval of minutes from January 17th. Do I have a mover and seconder for those minutes? Moved by Councillor Hanmer, seconded by Councillor Bodley. Are there any comments or notes on the minutes? Seeing none, I'll start the voting with Ward 1.
Councillor Hanmer in favor.
Councillor Bodley in favor.
Councillor Veith in favor.
Councillor Freeman in favor.
Councillor Vasic in favor.
Mayor Jaworski in favor.
And the chair is in favor as well, so that's carried. Moving towards staff reports, as I think folks get ready to bring in Tanya for this report. I will just point to later in the agenda, we do have a public planning meeting. And if you would like to speak at the public planning meeting later today on the Quiet Place item, please call the clerk's office at 519-747-8705 to be added to the list of delegations. And I'll repeat that detail as we get closer to that item. So we're on to item 9, staff reports. 9A, draft affordable housing grant program. I know I'm really excited for this. I will turn the floor over to Tanya Kerr.
Great. Thank you, Chair Henry, and good afternoon, council, staff, and all the online viewers. I'm very happy to be here this afternoon to present on my draft Affordable Housing Grant Program report. For my presentation this afternoon, I'm going to be focusing on highlighting some of the key sections of the report, including the draft corporate policy. Next slide, please. So this project came about upon direction from Council to create a grant program, the purpose being to guide the allocation of available funding to support not-for-profits that create affordable units in the city. And the reason it's targeted at not-for-profits is due to restrictions under the Municipal Act that require the city to have a community improvement plan in place before it can offer up any grant monies to a for-profit entity. Next slide, please. The program fund currently has a total of $500,000, and there's also about $1.3 million of additional monies in principal from a handful of Section 37 density bonusing applications. The reason for the in principle is because the city has not at this time received those financial contributions. Next slide, please. The project was originally to follow the following process and to be comprised of 3 stages. Phase 1, the project launch, which happened in May of last year. Phase 2, engagement, primarily in the summer and the beginning of fall. And then phase 3, originally staff was planning to bring forth a policy for council to approve. However, as part of the engagement that took place and the information staff received, as well as staff's review of other grant programs, it became very clear that grant programs such as these, are complex. They can be a little bit complicated. And for these reasons, as well as the fact that this is a new grant program for the City of Waterloo, staff felt it was very important to revise the process as follows. Next slide, please. And that was to first make available a draft program policy, make it available for comments, questions, and suggestions, with the intent then to take that feedback, make revisions as appropriate, and then present council with a final policy for council's consideration and hopefully approval. And the goal with that is late spring of this year. Next slide, please. So the engagement that took place was absolutely critical, and just wanted to take a moment to thank everyone who participated. I truly hope that you can see the impact that your feedback, information, wisdom sharing have had on the draft corporate policy. The engagement that took place primarily focused on discussing the parameters and preferences of a future grant program for the city on the following 6 questions. What type of affordable housing should the grant program focus on? Should projects be limited to a certain area of the city? What is the definition of affordable that it should use? Should it identify a minimum amount of affordable units to apply? What is the affordability period that the affordable units should follow? And should applicants have been required to have already secured funding from other levels of government before they can apply to the city's program? Next slide, please. And as mentioned, the engagement was absolutely critical based on the engagement sessions, the Engage Waterloo survey results, one-on-one discussions, as well as staff's review and consultation with staff from other grant programs. The result is the draft corporate policy that's contained within attachment 1 of this afternoon's report. In addition, it's taken into consideration the following: the grant program's available funding, overall contribution of the city's affordable housing supply, alignment with other funding programs, as we heard from not-for-profits that they will be applying to many programs, and trying to find a balance between identifying minimum program parameters, but at the same time, having the program be flexible. Next slide, please. So the draft corporate policy that's contained in the report follows the same template as the city's other corporate policies and is comprised of the following 7 sections. For this afternoon's presentation, I'm going to focus on the policy section of the draft corporate policy as it comprises the majority of the policy. Next slide, please. So in terms of structure of the program is being structured similar to other grant programs, and that is the city would issue a call for applications where interested not-for-profits would apply within a defined application window and then would be awarded funding on a competitive basis. So not-for-profits would apply, their applications would be evaluated by a staff committee, and the application or applications with the highest score would be recommended to the CAO for a grant. Next slide, please. In addition, the draft corporate policy identifies minimum eligibility criteria for the program, which includes the applicant has to be a not-for-profit organization, and the reason for that, once again, is due to the Municipal Act restrictions, and has to own or will own the subject property. The project has to be rental tenure, and at least 30% of the residential units have to be affordable, which means that the rents have to be provided at or below 80% of average market rent for a minimum of 25 years. And it also has to fall within one of the following project types: new construction, acquisition and rehabilitation of projects that are risk at being lost to the rental housing stock, or conversion of a non-residential building in full or in part to rental housing. Next slide, please. In addition, the policy identifies eligible costs, so what the grant monies could be used towards. And similar to other grant programs, it's restricted to capital costs for the affordable rental units. And based on feedback received as part of the engagement phase, this will include development application fees, studies, and development charges. The draft policy also identifies required application information that will need to be submitted, as well as it provides greater information about how applications will be evaluated and selected based on the following criteria: applicant qualifications, project concept and design, financial viability, and preferred criteria. Next slide, please. In terms of the preferred evaluation criteria, these were standard across all the grant programs that staff reviewed, and its purpose really is to encourage applicants to exceed the program's eligibility requirements in order to support affordable housing outcomes in our city. Applicants that meet some or all of these criteria will be considered stronger and will be scored higher. And on the screen before you, those are the 7 preferred evaluation criteria that have been suggested for the city's program. And then towards the end of the draft policy, we have some information about conditions of grant approval. This mainly surrounds the winning applicant having to enter into a contribution agreement with the city. And there's also some information about program implementation, monitoring, and reporting. Next slide, please. So in terms of next steps with this project, Council is being asked to receive the report as information and is also being asked to direct staff to prepare a final affordable housing grant program corporate policy after the commenting period, which will end on February 22nd, after which it's staff's intention then to take the feedback received, make changes as appropriate to the policy, and then return to council with a final policy for council to approve. And the goal and the hope with that is late spring of this year. So that's my presentation overall. I'm sure council has questions or comments, and I'm happy to answer any questions that council has. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tanya, for that for the very detailed presentation. I see questions pouring in from council. I know that they share. We all share excitement with this part of our broader affordable housing strategy that's coming forward first. I see Mayor Jaworski up first, and then Councillor Hanmer, Bodley, and Vasic. Go ahead, Mayor Jaworski.
Thank you, through the chair. Thank you very much, Tanya, for a well-researched report. I think we all know there has never been any more upheaval in the housing continuum than there has been over the past 18 months, 2 years. And in the meantime, you've been trying to work on this project. So I would say job well done. And but my comment or question, and this might just be a comment to take away, this report will come back to this term of council. However, there is an opportunity of obviously next term of council. I'm thinking about the funding, the financing of this project. And next term of council, there might be some keen interest in this project and maybe giving it some oomph because the need for affordable housing is so desperate in our community and throughout Canada. I'm just wondering if there's an opportunity for you to work with finance to make sure that when you're gathering the data, in particular for your final report, that you also are able to gather or sequester some information that would be useful for next term of council. Think of either our first year budget or the year 3-year budget, so that we don't have to go back out again and get citizen comments and that talk about the value of this program. I'm just wondering, have you given any thought to that?
Through you, Chair, to Mayor Jaworski, absolutely, I've given thought to that. What the thinking to date has been is when the final policy comes before council, and I said the goal with that is late spring, we would ask for council to release any funds that needed to be released. However, absolutely, I'm looking for any, future opportunities, whether through, budget process or other opportunities, and just wanted to give a plug that in addition to this initiative, the city is also working on an affordable housing strategy. So yeah, if there's any future opportunities for additional monies, would absolutely love it. With this specific program, with council's approval of the final policy when it comes to council, the policy will be in effect, and it will just then, and once all the funding that we have currently secured is exhausted, then yes, we would definitely be looking for future opportunities to fund the program, once again, in order to drive affordable housing outcomes in the city. Thank you.
Excellent response, Tanya. No further questions, Chair.
Thank you, Mayor. Next up is Councillor Hanmer. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair, through you. Tanya, great report. I really appreciate all the work that you have done in pulling this together, and it, as has been said, it's something that's near and dear to the hearts of this council and clearly identified in our strategic directions going forward. The mayor did ask one of my questions, and that was about the sustainability of the time of this project, the policy post this council. So thank you for your response to that. I did have a second question though, and that's just regarding the consultation that's underway right now on the policy itself. Can you just tell us a little bit more about that. I think you mentioned that it's ending on this week sometime the 22nd, next week, I guess. So who's been involved with it? How far afield have we gone to get comments? And are you getting comments back that that you're needing to have in order to finalize the policy for us?
Through you, Chair, to yourself, Councillor Hanmer, great question. So for the project, we have spent a lot of time on trying to engage as many people as possible, which includes the public, for certain the not-for-profits, housing support service providers, as well as a number of our committees of councils, as well as engaging with staff that administer other organizational grant programs, as identified in the report, which included for certain Region of Waterloo housing service staff, Halifax staff, as well as the region of Peel. And we tried as much as possible and did as many use as many engagement tools and opportunities as we could. There is a full list of all the engagement that we undertook as part of attachment 2 of the report for those who are interested. And with this draft policy, so when the council package was made available, I believe that was on February 3rd, we made sure to post the report on the Engage Waterloo project page. We also made a connection with the Affordable Housing Strategy Engage Waterloo project page because we know there might be definitely people interested there as well. Also, all the participants who engaged as part of this process or registered for one of the engagement sessions, they were also provided with an email with a copy of the report and draft corporate policy, and there was a request for comments. And yes, as you correctly noted, the deadline for comments is next Tuesday, February 22nd. So if anyone has any comments or suggestions, please reach out. To date, the comments have been trickling in. So far, it's been more questions, like clarification questions, but there has been a couple of comments, and in general, they've been very positive and similar to council. There definitely seems to be some excitement with this tool that the city is looking to implement. Thank you.
Thank you, Tanya. Again, you've done an outstanding job making sure that people have the opportunity to comment and provide input. I just wanted to give another opportunity for you to share that with the public who are listening today. So thank you again. I look forward to seeing the final report when it comes later in the spring. That is all for me, Chair Henry.
Thank you, Councillor Hanmer, and yeah, certainly circling back and making sure that what we heard is what we have is always a good last step before we bring something forward as final. Next up, we have Councillor Bodley. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, through you, Chair Henry. Like everyone else, really greatly appreciate the report here. I had a couple of questions. My first question was about cooperative housing. And I know there's been a lot of discussion around the cooperative housing movement of late, and I just wanted to confirm that cooperative housing would theoretically qualify under this program. And I wonder if we've received any feedback from any of the co-op housing sites, I guess, and the organizations in the city. And if there's anything specific within the policy directives that need to be considered with respect to co-op housing.
Through the chair to yourself, Councillor Bodley. So in terms of cooperatives in the city or in the region, they would be absolutely able to apply provided they were a not-for-profit. And once again, the reason for that is due to the restrictions under the Municipal Act, which prevent us from providing any grant monies to a for-profit outside of an affordable housing CIP, which the city does not at this time have. And I can confirm for council, we did have participation from a few of our cooperatives. In addition, one of our cooperatives very graciously helped us to circulate to the other cooperatives information about both the Affordable Housing Grant Program project, as well as the affordable housing strategy that is also being worked on by the city. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you for that clarification, Tanya. Second question is, as I was reading the report, there was discussion around nodes and corridors and major transit station areas, and maybe you could help sort of assuage some of my fears, I guess, here, because it sounded as though the verbiage around the locations for sort of eligibility of this grant money, we're going to prioritize areas with nodes and corridor areas or MTSA areas. And I really feel like when we look at this, it is a citywide problem, and when we think about where affordable housing is needed, in my opinion, it's everywhere within the city. And although I think there are great reasons to give some additional sort of benefit or thought to the nodes and corridor areas and MTSAs because of their proximity to services and transit and things like that, and I do understand that, I want to make sure that any report or any sort of document that goes out to the public is sort of unequivocal in stating that any application will be considered regardless of its location, and so long as it is within the city boundaries.
Through the chair to yourself, Councillor Bodley. So I can definitely confirm that the grant program would allow for applications and projects from across the city. However, as you noted, that one of the preferred evaluation criteria is for projects to be located in the city's intensification areas or being close to amenities and services. This was a standard provision across the grant programs that staff reviewed, including from the region of Waterloo, as well as the other organizations that are identified in greater detail in the report. And it's also based on feedback that we received during the engagement phase of the project, that staff overwhelmingly heard about the importance of not isolating tenants of affordable housing projects, and of the importance of tenants having access to amenities, services, as well as transit, as they might not have access to a vehicle. So just to then confirm, as I said, projects can be located throughout the city, but because of the feedback is we would be looking for the applicants to identify what services and amenities might be available. Once again, due to the engagement feedback that we heard during that phase of the project. Thank you.
Sounds like that's it for Councillor Bodley. I have. Okay. Councillor Vasic, next up.
Thanks, through you, Chair. Henry, yeah, I mean, I'm very excited to see this come forward. It's very comprehensive. One of my questions, actually one's been answered, so I just have one question. And one of the concerns that I'm hearing a lot right now is from students who can't find affordable places to live in the city. And this is going to become increasingly important as more students come back. I don't know how many are back right now, even though they're in person, if there are options to do online. But if this grant isn't a solution for that, it seems. So will we be assisting with the student housing affordability problem in other ways as a city?
Through the chair to yourself, Councillor Vasic, absolutely, and definitely can confirm that as staff as well as representatives on the city's Town and Gown Committee, we definitely are hearing about affordable housing issues and a lack of affordable housing options for our students, noting we have, 3 post-secondary institutions in the city. In addition, you will have seen in the report, we received formal comments from Wilfrid Laurier University Graduate Students Association, as well as myself and the Affordable Housing Strategy staff met with student leaders to hear their concerns. So while this specific project won't be helping in that regard, the citywide affordable housing strategy that the city is working on will be looking at that and opportunities and actions that the city can do because it's going to be looking at opportunities to increase the supply of housing, increase the supply of below market housing, and increase the diversity of housing options, which in turn could definitely help improve the affordability of housing options for students in the city, as well as other demographics in the city. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Okay, so it's all from council. I have a couple of questions myself, Tanya. One, I think just for everybody's benefit, do you have a sense of, and can you tell us about when the strategy is coming? You said by late spring, and this is one component of it, correct?
To yourself, Chair Henry. So in terms of the Affordable Housing Grant Program, staff is hoping to bring forward a final policy for council to approve, and our goal with that is late spring, so before summer comes about. In terms of the affordable housing strategy, that is being worked on by the city. My understanding is the staff report and discussion paper for that project is currently making its way through the city's internal review process. And the hope is, staff that's working on that, my colleague Michelle Lee, is looking to bring that forward to council hopefully by late March.
Yeah, I think that's helpful in terms of just situating us in the sequence of things that are coming, because there's a lot of moving pieces here. I know we talked about through Q&A, future funding needs and opportunities after we exhaust the sort of one-time funds that we were able to build up, and we're left with, at the moment, the $100,000 a year that this council put towards this avenue of funding. When do we anticipate, the first sort of request for proposals or release of these funds to look for people applying for grants? Do we anticipate that after council approves the final policy, that it would happen relatively shortly thereafter, or is this a 2023 thing?
To yourself, Chair Henry. Excellent question. So what my hope is that, provided, council approves the final policy, then it would be, my intention for to work on the implementation material. So, application form, the contribution agreement. And my hope would be that we could issue a call for applications this fall. That's my goal, and that would be my hope. As you noted, though, there are a couple of pieces that have to happen before then. Thank you.
No, that's helpful. It would certainly be an excellent Christmas present from a brand new inaugurated council to the community to be able to announce grant recipients either around the holiday time or early into the new year. So certainly I appreciate that timing. And one thing, just because Town and Gown got referenced, Tanya, and I used to be more connected to where this all was. I know we were doing every other year data collection that was giving us some good insight to inform policy direction and supports that we were providing. that got put off just before the pandemic for good reasons, and then it's got put off by the pandemic. Do you have a sense of when we're going to be able to get more survey data and sort of demand supply analysis done? Because I know that's a missing piece always in the back of my mind when I'm hearing the same concerns that Councillor Vasic raised, to be able to have some good data behind it and to sort of understand in this very dynamic environment what's happening out there on the ground.
To you, Chair Henry. Absolutely. So at the Town and Gown, as noted, this is definitely on our radar. And as you correctly notice, every couple of years, the committee has produced a student accommodations report. So because of the pandemic, that was put on pause. The Student Accommodation Working Group got together last year and was successful in updating the student accommodation supply data, both on and off campus. However, based on direction from the steering committee, as well as information we were receiving from our post-secondary institutions, there was a pause placed on updating the Town and Gown demand information. And the reason for that is because of the pandemic, the institutions found that many students who would have typically resided in the city outside of a pandemic were not residing in the city. They were at home or elsewhere. There was also a lot of classes taking place remotely. So as noted, that was paused, but definitely this year, looking to reignite that conversation with the Town and Gown Committee and hopefully be able to update the information so then that we can bring forth some information for council and as well as the community, who I know really look forward to that report and the information in that report. Thank you.
Thank you, Tanya. That's good to know. I know I saw a report from the Waterloo Undergraduate Student Association. They've done some of their own collection to sort of back up concerns that students have been raising around finding accommodations as winter term started back in January. And I mean, I know my read of looking at that was one of the single largest contributing factors was that we had students on co-op term, but they were able to do their co-op remotely, and so they didn't sublet their units, which normally would have been a huge flood of supply into the winter market. And that caused hopefully a very short-term kind of issue, but if there's certainly a way forward where there are more virtual work terms, I have a feeling that that'll throw a wrench into how we calculate demand and supply. Anyways, that's sort of moving a bit off of the topic at hand. I don't see any other hands up. So I'll thank you for an excellent report and conversation around this. Council, there is a recommendation before us. I see that Mayor Jaworski wishes to move that recommendation. Is there a seconder? I see Councillor Hanmer is seconding that. Is there any discussion that folks wish to have on this before I start the vote? Seeing none, I'll start with Ward 1.
Councillor Hanmer, in favor.
Councillor Bodley, in favor.
Councillor Veith, in favor.
Councillor Freeman, in favor.
Councillor Vasic, in favor.
Mayor Jaworski, in favor.
And the chair is in favor. So that passes. We'll look forward to seeing the final report back in the spring. So that brings us to item 10, public meetings. We have one formal public meeting today, and I have this blurb, as I always do, as we begin that. This is a formal public meeting to consider zoning bylaw amendment Z-21-12, 535 Quiet Place, Hickory Terraces Limited. Any persons who want further notice of this application, including the passage of any bylaw, should contact the planner, Max Kerrigan, at 519-747-8003 or at max.kerrigan@waterloo.ca, spelled as MAX kerrigan@waterloo.ca. Will the clerk please advise council of the method used to give notice of the meeting and the dates notice was given?
Notice was advertised in the Waterloo Chronicle on January 27th, 2022. It was mailed and emailed on January 25th, 2022 to all property owners within 120 meters of the subject property, to public agencies, and to all persons who signed in or spoke at the informal public meeting, which was held on October 18th, 2021, and to all persons who requested further notice.
Thank you very much, Natalia. Since I didn't do it more recently, I would just say again, if you would like to speak at this public planning meeting, please call the clerk's office at 519-747-8705 to be added to the list of delegations. Now the planner, Max Kerrigan, will now give a brief overview of the application. Go ahead, Max.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Henry, Mayor Jaworski, and members of council, city staff, and members of the public. My name, as you heard, is Max Kerrigan. I'm a senior development planner and urban designer with the city. As has already been mentioned, this is the formal public meeting for zone change application Z2112 for lands located at 535 Quiet Place. It's an application advanced by Hickory Terraces Limited, and they are represented here today by Kristen Barisdale of GSP Group, who will be giving a brief presentation following mine. Next slide, please. For context, the lands are triangular in shape with grades falling to the northwest. The ION LRT and freight rail line runs parallel with the westerly lot line. A city multi-use trail runs parallel with the easterly lot line with medium density residential beyond. To the south is medium density residential dwelling, medium density residential dwellings consisting of walk-ups and townhouses. The site's currently vacant and is generally surrounded by residential developments, except to the northwest, which are lands designated open space, which are west of the rail corridor, and the Albert McCormick Community Center to the north. The site's well served by transit with a number of bus routes running within close proximity, as well as the ION LRT running immediately to the west of the site. The R&T ION LRT station is approximately an 8-minute walk away, as the Northfield station is about an 18-minute walk to the north. Next slide, please. These pictures just generally show the site in its current state, showing the access across the rail corridor to the west, as well as the multi-use trail that links to the AMCC and the Waterloo Trail to the north. Next slide, please. This is a conceptual aerial perspective of the development proposal. The proposal consists of 3 8-story residential towers sitting upon a shared 4-story podium totaling 12 stories. The development will consist of a mix of 1 and 2-bedroom units. The development has evolved through the planning process in order to balance the various permissions on this awkwardly shaped parcel of land. Next slide, please. These are just 2 additional perspectives. They provide further reference to how the towers sit upon a podium that ties the towers together, which also sit upon a parking deck that emerges from below the grade as the site slopes away from Quiet Place. Next slide, please. This rendered site plan also provides additional information and clarity on the balance of building versus parking deck, as well as the location of the proposed amenity spaces around the perimeter of the site, as well as upon the parking deck in various locations. Next slide, please. With respect to the Eop Policy Framework, the subject site's designated mixed-use, high-density residential, which contemplates multiple residential development intended to provide opportunities for high levels of intensification. The maximum density permissions are 600 bedrooms per hectare with a maximum height permission of 40 meters. A small portion on the north side of the subject site is designated open space, as mentioned. The open space component is identified as a locally significant wetland and is regulated by the GRCA. Adequate infiltration and stormwater management measures must be demonstrated for a GRCA clearance and subsequent planning acceptance. As presented, the proposal conforms to the OP. Next slide, please. In terms of zoning, the subject site is zoned residential mixed use 40, which permits multifamily residential, a maximum density of 600 bedrooms per hectare, and a maximum building height of 40 meters or 12 stories. In general, the proposed development complies with the zoning bylaw. Next slide, please. That said, prior to any development being permitted on this property, a holding provision must be removed. The holding provision is applied to all properties that are within 75 meters of a railway right-of-way. The holding can only be removed at such time that it's demonstrated that any adverse impacts related to noise, emissions, or vibration are mitigated, and safety standards are met. As this portion of track is occasionally used by CN Freight Rail, city staff required clearance from both the region as well as CN Rail itself. Next slide, please. In addition, the applicant is requesting approval for a number of site-specific variances from the bylaw. Typically, these variances of this scale will be requested through the Committee of Adjustment. However, given the opportunity to approve them in conjunction with this holding removal, it's a more efficient process for all involved. The site-specific regulations include a reduction in the building setback to the railway corridor, a reduction in the parking requirement from 1 space to 0.9 spaces per unit, relief from the definition of landscaped open space to include landscaped open space and amenity upon the parking deck, to allow 1 parking space in the front yard, and lastly, a request to increase the permitted height of the parapet to meet Ministry of Labor specifications. Next slide, please. In evaluating a zoning bylaw amendment application, staff undertake a thorough review of applicable legislation as well as how the proposed built form fits within its context. This proposed development is within the permissions of the official plan and zoning bylaw with respect to form, height, and density. Staff reviewed the proposed site-specific regulations with a keen eye on the unique site location, conditions, and shape. All matters related to heritage impact, architecture, urban design, safety of future residents, shadows, public feedback, traffic circulation, servicing capacity, source water protection, road widenings, and other future approvals are assessed. These matters are addressed in my staff report. Next slide, please. In order to develop the lands, the holding provision applied due to proximity to the rail corridor must be removed, subject to the acceptance and approval of specific criteria related to noise, vibration, emissions, and safety, among other matters. The applicant has submitted a noise and vibration assessment in support of lifting the holding symbol, along with written confirmation from CN Rail that there are no objections to the proposed 1.5 meter setback to the exposed parking structure, subject to the provision of a railway crash wall to the satisfaction of CN Rail through the site plan process. The region of Waterloo has reviewed the noise and vibration assessment and are also satisfied that impacts to sensitive uses can be mitigated to acceptable levels through the design of the development. Based on these clearances from CN Rail and the region of Waterloo, the holding symbol applied to the lands can be removed. Next slide, please. Now, based on a review of the application, staff are recommending that council approve the site-specific regulations for a reduced side yard setback, where the bylaw requires a 15-meter building setback from the rail corridor. The applicant is proposing to reduce the side yard setback from 3 meters to 1.5 meters, and to reduce the minimum 15-meter building setback from the rail corridor to 1.5 meters in order to permit the exposed parking structure and rail crash wall, which technically form part of the building as they are built upon the same foundation. The reduced setbacks would not be in question. However, the site grades and high water table result in a partially exposed structure and resultant variance request. All habitable or other sensitive use space will remain as per the bylaw requirement, i.e. a minimum setback of 15 meters from the rail corridor. The second site-specific regulation request is to reduce the parking requirement from 1 space per unit to 0.9 spaces. The proposed reduction would result in 42 fewer parking spaces compared to the standard requirement in the bylaw. This is 420 spaces proposed, whereas 466 spaces are required. Staff are of the opinion that this reduction is reasonable in this context, having regard for such things as comparable local parking data from other apartment multifamily projects in the neighborhood, proximity to high order public transit, including local bus service, as well as 2 ion stations, access to multi-use trails, active transportation infrastructure, the irregular nature of the lands which impact efficient design, the minor nature of this reduction, as well as compliance with the 0.1 visitor parking space requirement. The third request is to modify the definition of landscaped open space for this site to include common outdoor areas, landscape space upon the parking deck. The parking deck occurs as a result of the underground parking level extending above grade due to the sloping topography of the site. Staff do not object to the modified definition of landscaped open space for this site, as the relief is based on topography, as mentioned, high groundwater constraints, as well as the intent to provide some landscaping and accessory hardscapes. The fourth request is to allow one parking space in the front yard near the main entry. Staff do not object to the applicant's request to permit one parking space, as it's to provide a dedicated short-term parking space for couriers, parcel delivery, and pickup drop-off. The proposed parking space will reduce the likelihood of such vehicles occupying the quiet place right-of-way, blocking vehicular entrance to the parking area behind the building face. Substantial landscaping will be required to soften the appearance of the parking space through site plan. The final request is to permit an increase to the permitted parapet height from 1.2 meters to 1.85 meters for additional architectural articulation at the top of the towers, as well as to act as a guardrail that satisfies the Ministry of Labor specifications for the rooftops. As in, it's a provision of a fall protection system rather than a standard safety guardrail. Planning staff do not object to this increased parapet height for the development to help sculpt the top of the towers architecturally and to supplant the need for a guardrail. Next slide, please. Lastly, staff are recommending that council endorse a number of site plan directives in order to facilitate landscaping upon the parking deck and in alignment with the city's climate change mitigation goals as well as stormwater management objectives. We recommend that council support the following site plan directives: that sufficient soil depth be provided on the parking deck to support trees and landscaping, that trees be planted at a spacing of 8 meters on center along the community trail interface on the eastern side yard, and that green roofs be provided wherever feasible on the podium and towers to reduce solar infiltration and assist in managing stormwater on site. Next slide, please. That concludes my presentation, and I'd be more than happy to answer any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Max. Looking to council at this time for questions of Max. We'll get to opinions later. Looking for questions. While we're waiting, Max, I have just a couple I wanted to confirm from your presentation and ask about. One, did I hear you correctly that the reason this is a zoning bylaw amendment before us is because it's more efficient to do a holding provision removal, which would have come before us anyways, and all of those other variances that the Committee of Adjustment would normally hear, just as one here is a zoning bylaw. And if there wasn't then a holding provision removal here, that the variances that are being requested through this amendment would be dealt with at C of A instead.
Councillor, that is correct. The primary reason we are in front of council is to remove the holding provision. The site-specific variances, in planning staff's opinion, would likely have been minor enough to have gone through the minor variance process. But given we are already in front of council, it made the most sense to present them all as one and tie it up with a nice bow.
Thank you, Max. And the other question I had for you at this point was, I saw a note in your report on stormwater management, and that prior to a building permit being issued, the applicant would need to obtain approval from engineering services on their sort of stormwater strategy. In your opinion, and if Mr. Ormson has an answer to this as well, I'd appreciate that too. In your opinion, is that sort of stage and approval mechanism sufficient, or is that a matter which site plan review would also benefit from having direction over? I'm just trying to make sure that we give engineering, if this goes forward, we give engineering services the tools they need to secure the design and requirements that we would want to be able to meet meet stormwater attenuation, since I do know that stormwater downstream here is an issue for members on my side of the ward boundary.
To Councillor Henry, through the rezoning process and consultation with city staff and outside agencies, including the GRCA, there's been several conversations and several meetings in this regard, both stormwater attenuation on site as well as potential quality or quantity impacts downstream, as well as potential impacts to an endangered species of newt, I believe, within the river system there, the stream system. So these matters have already been in front of our engineering staff, and working with the applicant's engineering consultant, a solution was determined, at least with respect to controlling any overflow off of site to make sure that it met the minimum standards. And through site plan process, we'll certainly work with strategies on how to potentially further attenuate or improve the water that is dealt with on site. So just to be clear, it's top of mind, and all those required to review these pieces are up to the know and well informed. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Max. I'm seeing no questions from other councillors at this time, so I will release you. Okay, next on my script. As a reminder, if any person watching would like to receive further notice of this application, you can contact Max Kerrigan at 519-747-8003 or at max.kerrigan@waterloo.ca, spelled as max.kerrigan @waterloo.ca. If you would like to speak at the meeting, please call the clerk's office at 519-747-8705 if you want to delegate on this item. I will now call upon any registered delegations to speak, beginning with, I have Kristen Barrisdale. Kristen, the floor is yours.
Good evening, Councillor Henry and members of council. Can you hear me?
We can. Yes, we can. Please go ahead. Well, we could.
I'll keep my presentation very brief this afternoon. Just wanted to touch on a couple of things that Mr. Kerrigan spoke about, as well as circle back on some comments and questions or points of discussion that were brought up during our October neighborhood meeting. So as noted previously, there was a statutory meeting that was held on October 18th, 2021. There were a few residents that spoke at that meeting, as well as some questions from council for clarification at that meeting. Subsequent to that meeting, we had a follow-up meeting as organized by the ward councillor with some of the residents to answer any additional questions that some of the residents had, as well as have some further discussions with regards to the proposed development. Next slide, please. So as Mr. Kerrigan touched on, the proposed development remains the same as to what council was shown in October. It includes 3 12-story buildings with a total of 423 units. This breaks down to a total of 735 bedrooms. As Mr. Kerrigan touched on, the proposed development includes 224 parking spaces, which equates to about 0.9 spaces per unit, as well as 254 bicycle parking spaces. Next slide, please. Again, this is similar, if not exact, to the concept that was presented to council in October. The massing of the building and the scale of the building is situated to interface with Quiet Place, as well as the existing trail that runs along the east side of the property. And then along the top corner of the screen, you'll see the LRT corridor, and that is the rail corridor that was spoken of. You'll see on this slide, the gray area is denoted as the surface parking that's on top of the parking structure. There are subsequent layers of parking beneath that. And I just wanted to draw your attention to a number of the green areas that are also situated on the parking structure. This is a reflective of the permissions that we're seeking. Rather than an exemption from the bylaw, we're asking for a bit more flexibility interpretation of what outdoor amenity space is, to include some of these rooftop areas which would not typically be included. Next slide, please. This is a perspective of proposed development along Quiet Place. So as you can see on the left-hand corner of your screen, that is Quiet Place as it exists. On the right-hand corner of the screen, this is the existing trail along the property boundary. Next slide, please. And again, this is simply a perspective along Quiet Place. This perspective gives you a slight indication of some of the grading and terracing situations or circumstances that exist along the property line that interfaces with the trail. So you'll see along the right-hand bottom side of the screen, it almost looks like stepping that's in place. And that represents the significant grade change that happens as you move from Quiet Street to the rear of the site towards the rail line. Next slide, please. So I'm just going to take a minute to touch on some of the comments and questions that we have received as part of the statutory public meeting and subsequent follow-up with the city. I know there was also some letters or a written submission that was submitted to the city and part of the council package that was sent out. And I think that some of these comments will address those. So first and foremost, the couple of comments we heard are questions related to rental rates and the number of bedrooms. There was a request as to whether or not we had any indication at this point as to what the rental rates would be. Based on the current market and forecast, now this is based on 2022 rates, we would expect that the rental rates are going to be between $2,200 and $3,000. However, as I'm sure council is aware of, the construction market and market demands are quite volatile at this point. While we have been moving through detailed site plan design, we don't have final site plan approval, and we therefore are not going to be moving into construction in the immediate future. And it'll just be a matter of monitoring some of the impacts on costing and increased supply and demand issues within the construction industry. All the bedrooms will be considered studio bedrooms, 1-bedroom or 2-bedroom units. There was a question about affordable housing. This specific project does not include affordable housing units. However, the developer has an existing rental supply portfolio within the city of Waterloo, which has a number of affordable housing units, and if asked, has the opportunity to direct future tenants to that existing stock. The next question we had was, or comments we received were with respect to construction traffic and noise. There will undoubtedly be some disruptions as the building is being constructed along Quiet Place. However, through the city's detailed site plan approval process, the developer is required to prepare a number of studies and reports to indicate construction phasing, how things are going to be protected on the site. There's also a number of construction practices that need to be implemented during construction. This would include hoarding and safety fencing, security measures, mud mats, etc. So again, while there will undoubtedly be a very short-term impact on construction, the city has a number of mechanisms in place, both through the approval process as well as the building permit process that developer will be required to adhere to. One of the comments that we received related to traffic, increased traffic volumes and potential parking issues. The proposed development, as I touched on, includes 423 23 units, and it's not quite at the threshold from the city's requirement that would indicate a traffic study needed to be done to assess traffic impacts and parking. Quiet Place at this location is a local street. It does provide access to existing development to the south, as well as this proposed development. And it's anticipated that the traffic volumes from this project will be a very minor increase to the existing traffic volumes within the area. There was some questions with regards to sustainability and what kind of sustainability principles or considerations will be implemented as part of the proposed development. These include sustainable precast concrete, energy efficient LED lighting, construction practices such as window glazing, installation and insulation that would meet all energy efficiency and energy conservation requirements. And as I noted on in the beginning of the presentation, the rooftop landscaping that has been incorporated onto the site, those rather larger patches of green area, all of those will help reduce the heat island effect. Finally, one of the last comments or concerns that came up through this process was landscaping and tree planting. And as Mr. Kerrigan touched on in his presentation, the city has some requirements with regards to mature or large canopy tree plantings. Our concept provides for them along the quiet street portion of the site, as well as along the portion of the site that abuts the rail line. Because of the terracing and grading situations and constraints that I noted in the first slide, there is some difficulties accommodating mature large canopy trees along that portion of the site. However, the landscape plans and terracing plans will provide for substantial shrubs and grasses, etc., that will enhance the visual landscaping along that edge that is shared with the walkway. In addition, the developer wanted to note that they are agreeable to providing mature trees off-site. So if there's some further discussions that can happen with the city with respect to providing larger canopy trails along that trail or on the opposite side of the site along the trail, that is just definitely something that we would pursue discussions with the city in the future. Next slide, please. So that concludes my presentation. Again, this is just a copy of the concept that you saw earlier, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Kristen. Looking to council for any questions. I am not seeing any from council at this time, so thank you, Kristen, for your presentation. Next on my delegation list is Matthew Garrett. Matthew.
Can everyone hear me all right?
Yes, yes, we can, Matthew. You have 10 minutes. Go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you, members of council, for having me here today. A little bit about me before I start. I am a graduate student here in the city of Waterloo. This project is not in my neighborhood or in my vicinity, but I am here to support it. I do want to mention that I think, as was noted earlier in the meeting, we're in a period where rental rates are a little volatile and where there is stress on the rental stock in Waterloo, as was previously mentioned. And just as an anecdote, earlier this term, I am secure in where I'm living, but as I saw other people posting, I even saw people who were posting offering up to split a one-person bedroom with strangers, if it could mean getting a place in Waterloo for this upcoming term as university and college students return to school. And I thought that was something that was really concerning. I want to thank Councillor Vasek for bringing up the topic of students when we're talking about affordable housing. And I think despite the price points that we heard earlier from the previous delegation, I think that this is still something where we can see benefit to students down the line as we construct more rental stock. Addition of bedrooms during a housing crisis. I use the word crisis. We have a lot of people coming into Ontario and we don't have enough places to put them. I'm all for more people in Ontario, but we need to make sure the housing stock keeps track. I think it's really great to see this project come forward, especially near transit, especially in a dense form. I think this is a really well-placed project personally. And I wanted to circle back for a second and speak a little bit about affordability. I think even though none of these units are necessarily affordable by our typical definitions, I think there's good evidence from recent studies that show that even when you add market rate housing Eventually you see costs lower further down the housing chain as people move up the housing chain to fill those new places. So I think this really will have a positive long-term impact for students if this proposal goes ahead. And of course, what is a question here is removing the holding restriction. The holding restriction is there because of the rail line. And I think really the staff report shows that the developers have put in the work to create a solution that satisfies everybody who uses the rail line. The crash barrier makes sense. And I also think that the site-specific things before us today, before you today, rather, are really quite reasonable as well. I think the parking reduction seems justified. I know it's a common request for people who are doing new development. I iterate, maybe it's not even something that needs to be at the current level it's at, but that's beside the point today. I want to commend everyone involved for this project because it doesn't seem like it's a straightforward project. Moving from the 15-meter setback on the rail line to the 1.5-meter setback. I know that this is probably a more complicated project than some of the ones that come forward. And I'm really glad that the recommendations or requirements that came from staff to the developer seem to have been followed in most cases. And I think this can be a success story. And I hope that this will extend to the outstanding stormwater issue as well. As someone who continues to rent here and somebody who wants to consider staying and buying in a home in Waterloo this decade, I think increasing the housing stock is going to do a lot for someone like me in terms of trying to cool the housing market just a little bit more. That means that eventually my income can catch up to the place where it needs to be to actually be able to afford that. Finally, I think it's really good to see projects like these. I'm hoping that we get to see more as time progresses, and I really hope to see this proposal go forward. That is the end of my delegation. I would like to thank you all for your time and your attentive ears, and I would welcome any questions you may have for me.
Thank you very much, Matthew. Always good to hear from you and from folks that are looking to make the journey to stay, and it is more of a journey now than it has been in a very long time. Are there any questions from council for Matthew? Seeing none, we do have at least one caller so far. Can I just make the introduction, Madam Clerk? Yes. We have David Torreson on the line. And I think after you're unmuted, you will have 5 minutes. So please go ahead, David, when you are ready.
Hi, thank you very much. I hope you all can hear me. My name is David Thorson. I've lived across the street from Albert McCormick on Parkside since 2008 with my wife and my daughter. I'm a bookkeeper. She is a nanny. I guess technically we'd be considered low income, and my biggest concern here is the rates. $2,200 to $3,000 is a lot more than what is currently the rates for apartments in some of the older buildings here. I do understand this is an issue of supply and demand, and we need more supply to bring those rates down. However, I am concerned that there are no affordable units as part of this massive project that will build. I mean, I live here. This is going to be, it almost seems impossible to fit on that site. But that said, I wish there were more affordable units. I see the writing on the wall and what's happened in other places as they refurbish this area. We are getting priced out, and it's only a matter of time before our building, I'm sure, will be sold to a developer, and we will not be able to afford what replaces it. And it's just sad that working people with jobs were able to live in Waterloo, excuse the emotion in my voice, less than 5 years ago can no longer afford to live here. And won't be able to afford to live here. I love this neighborhood. I love the balance of it. I love the diversity of the residents and structures and businesses. And I'm just very concerned that I will not be able to live here. And while grants and housing programs are great, they are not a big solution. There's just simply not enough of that to accommodate all the people that have jobs and want to continue working and living in Waterloo. And they get pushed to Kitchener, and then Kitchener pushes them to Cambridge, and then Cambridge is getting developed with more, I would call, faux luxury units that are just decent but are overpriced. And given the comments by the speaker before the last caller on 2,200 to 3,000 with the caveat that, you know, everything is going up, we all know what direction those rates are going. Those are going to be more. For 1 and 2 bedroom apartments, 2,200 to 3,000. Even the last caller in favor of this made the comment that he hopes to be able to afford to live here. And I just think it's sad that the new Waterloo is so unaffordable for so many people. I had other concerns about the noise and the additional traffic, but really my biggest concern here is the rates. There's no commitment to what the rates will be. And like I said, I fear the day when I get the notice that my building's being sold, a tower will go up, and what replaces it will be several hundred, if not thousands, more than what we currently pay. It's not a great solution to, I mean, while you're adding, I'm sorry, more supply, that's good, but it's not great for a lot of residents that are just barely or can't afford the apartment they have now. To know that what replaces it will be so much more expensive than what they're paying, that they'll have to move out of not only the city, but probably the region. I just ask, where are people supposed to live in this new Waterloo? Where are we all supposed to go? There's just not enough in the way of assistance grants and other programs, and to simply say, well, there's existing affordable units in place, and we're just going to build this massive development and direct people to that. And I'm sure this is just the first to go up, and my building will go down, as well as, you know, the other 50-year-old buildings on this block. But a lot of people here are quiet, too busy to even call into these meetings, but I hear from them every day, and they are just as scared of their building being sold and not being able to afford what replaces it. So I really would ask that in every decision you make, to consider the people that would like to remain in Waterloo, that would like a place in this community. I love this community, and I will be very sad if I have to move out. And so I hope I have enough time to find a way to make enough money to continue to live in the new Waterloo, and anything and everything you can do to keep these units affordable and put as many affordable and genuinely affordable, not meaning that the unit that replaces it costs $1,000 more than the previous unit. That's not affordable, but actual affordable units, because it's just not enough. And this is the biggest issue people face. If you can't afford a place to live where you want to live, or even anywhere, that is a crisis. So please, I know you don't dictate what can and can't be sold. You can't control the market, but you do have some influence, and use that to advocate not just for wealthier, newer residents coming in, but the people that would also like to remain here. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, David, for your comments. I know your ward councillor was first on my list to make a comment arising from your delegation, and then I'll have one as well. Councillor Veith?
Is that me? Sorry, it's Councillor Veith here. Something kind of I lost the connection, but can you hear me?
We can.
Okay.
We can, Angela. Go ahead.
Okay, sorry. Thank you. Through you, Chair Henry. Thank you so much, David, for coming today. And I totally get where you're coming from. This is a huge issue in the neighborhood. We have people that have lived in this area for many, many, many years and worked hard, and now seeing this development happening, and it's not just on Quiet Place. Things are starting to really change in the Lakeshore area. But that being said, yeah, and as you said, council can't control you know, pricing, but we need the housing. We need these units for people to live in. And so I want to thank you for your passion and for calling in today. Not that many people call in to discuss these issues. So yeah, I really appreciate your thoughts and that you took the time this afternoon to talk to us. So yes, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Reith. And David, let me just say that I appreciate not just that you called in, but that the words you spoke speak for so many people in this community. Many are in the state that you are in. I know as part of our background studies through the Affordable Housing Strategy and other matters that we've worked through, we've gotten a fairly detailed picture of the strains that people are under. There are many who do very well in this community, but there are many who don't. It's bifurcated in a way. There are in a sense two camps, although of course it's a continuum of people in all different states here. I would note that we're working through an inclusionary zoning strategy that would allow us to, when we meet all of the onerous regulations of the province, to be able to implement it, will allow us to require developments, market rate developments, to provide a certain percentage of units that are affordable in certain ways. We've got to work out the details on that, and the math has to work for the province's rules. And the hammer that came down on us before we started that project was the current provincial government limited where we could apply it to. This is not an area where we can apply it to, only within, you know, a station area within a reasonable distance of a station. This council, the council in Kitchener, many councils across the province have argued to the province that we need to reinstate that, because this is an issue everywhere. When market rate housing goes up, it shouldn't be affordable eventually through decades-long filtering, where new buildings become old buildings and become affordable again. But we need to have some affordability built into every new building now. So we're doing our darndest with what we've been given to allow that to happen. The provincial government constrained how much of the city we could apply that to, and we're asking them to fix it. And if they don't, hopefully this is an issue people can bring, along with tenant protections, along with renoviction issues, along with vacancy, vacancy control rather than just rent control. These are all matters that I think would assist on the demand side, in addition to be able to redress the housing crisis, in addition to the supply side that we have some very limited tools to be able to provide, including additional density in places like this one. So I hope that you and others, raise your voices through the provincial election that is coming. There are many tools at their disposal. And please do continue to call us and let us know what your views on are. We have an official plan review underway where we're looking at how we can deal with missing middle housing and how, if there are any tools that we have to be able to prevent the issues that you're worried about in your own place. Please do provide us comments through that process. We need all the ideas and all the support behind us to be able to make some difficult changes to make sure that everybody can afford to move to Waterloo and can afford to stay in Waterloo no matter what your income level is. That's the commitment of the council, and we're trying to do as much work as we're allowed to do, and need a lot more support from our senior levels of government to be able to help assuage the anxiety that so many people are feeling in this crisis. So thank you for giving voice to that today, to how the housing crisis has touched your shores. So I appreciate that you've come on and spoken to us today, David. I'm seeing no other questions there. We don't have anybody who has called in yet, but we will now take a 5-minute recess to see if there is anybody who will call in who also wishes to speak to this item. If any person watching or listening or whatever we would call these virtual meetings and what you're doing with them, would like to speak to this item, please call the clerk's office at 519-747-8705, and we will reconvene at 4:50. And we are back. I will do a roll call and then we'll check to see if anybody has registered. We'll start a roll call with Ward 1.
Councillor Henry, present.
Councillor Bodley, present.
Councillor Veith, present.
Councillor Vasic, present.
Mayor Jaworski here.
And Chair Henry is here. That's all of us that are here on this item. Madam Clerk informs me that the phone lines have not been lighting up any further than they already were. So this formal public meeting is concluded and the application is now open to council for a motion and debate. I would note if anyone watching would like to receive further notice of the application after the meeting, please contact the planner, Max Kerrigan, at 519-747-8003 or at max.kerrigan@waterloo.ca, spelled as MAX.KERRIGAN @waterloo.ca. Okay, so it's open to council for a motion and debate. I see Councillor Veith is interested in moving, and Councillor Bodley is interested in seconding, and Councillor Veith has to read a long blurb and then has a comment. So go ahead, Councillor Veith.
Thank you, through you, Chair Henry. I move to approve the application, whereas Council has considered all written and oral submissions from the public and stakeholders, and whereas Council has considered the professional opinions of planning staff, therefore be it resolved that 1, that Council approve staff report IPPW 2022-010, and 2, that Council approve the zoning bylaw amendment Z-21-12 535 Quiet Place in accordance with Section 8 of Staff Report IPPW 2022-010.
Thank you, Councillor Veith, and I understand you had a comment as well.
Do we need I don't need seconder on that first? Or?
I got it moved and seconded for the record,
right,
but then
okay,
you have to.
Right. Okay, right.
So go ahead.
Sorry, I've never done that. I've never read that before, so it's a new thing for me. So I just want to, I want to thank Max for all, and staff, and Kristen for all the work that has been done on this difficult piece of property. And all the negotiations, and it's because it's complicated. Not a big piece of property, but we need this. We need the housing. We need the space. I also want to thank Matthew and David for coming to be delegations today, and I look forward to a new development in our area that it fits well. It's a great location for people that don't have a car or don't wish to have a car. There's so many amenities close by, including the transit buses right there. So it was a great public meeting that we had back in, I think it was November 1st maybe, but so I'm really happy and excited that we're going to have new housing in the neighborhood for future residents of the neighborhood. It's a great neighborhood, and it's going to be a great addition. So thank you, and thank you, Chair Henry.
Looking to see if there are other comments from my colleagues. I am seeing none. I will notice the adjoining ward councillor across the street that we do have plans for Albert Street this year to be able to do some road reconfiguration to accommodate safe cycling and active transportation, in infrastructure along here. So people will have even more reasons not to get around by car for all of their daily needs and trips. And we are going through an official plan and zoning update and review, where I know parking spaces, vehicular parking spaces, are under the radar. So perhaps by the time this winds its way through to construction and occupancy, our zoning bylaw may look a bit different on the parking rate, and the proponents might be able to install a lot more bike parking in their parking garage on parking spaces we might no longer require. And I think that would be helpful for them to continue to look at as they go through the building stage of this, and then through the ownership stage of this property on how you can make sure to accommodate enough bikes to use the infrastructure that's being built around there. I made numerous comments earlier on the state of the housing market, which I'd echo here as part of reasons for approving this, but also reasons for doing all of the other work that this council is doing, and that we will have to continue through future councils to be able to address the crisis. With that, we will take the vote on this item, starting with Ward 1.
Thank you, Chair Henry. Councillor Hanmer in favor.
Councillor Bodley in favor.
Councillor Veith in favor.
Councillor Vasic in favor.
Mayor Jaworski in favor.
And the chair is in favor as well, so that is approved. Working through the balance of the agenda, there is no consideration of notice of motion given at a previous meeting or a notice of motion at this meeting. There is no communications and correspondence or unfinished business. Are there any questions, Council? I see new business. That's next. Are there any questions, Council? Seeing no questions, I see Mayor Jaworski has new biz. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Henry. You know, it's sort of more like old biz, and it's 100 weeks. It's 100 weeks of the pandemic that we're coming up on or in, depending on your point of view of where it started. And I think about the city of Waterloo and the great team that we have here under Mr. Anderson and the commissioners, their directors, all the staff. And we've had several hundred staff who have come in tirelessly, day in and day out, for 100 weeks. And certainly we want to, on behalf of council, officially thank them for all their service, helping keep the city of Waterloo running. And to all the other employees who have met the challenge of working from home, dealing with family matters, dealing with conflicts on the internet and other things, and zigging and zagging all the time, just as the clerk's office has done so well today, running like a hamster in a wheel, yet making things seem smooth on the outside. And I really think that's a testament to the staff that we have on hand at the City of Waterloo. And I would just like to offer our thanks and congratulations from all of council to Mr. Anderson and the team at the City of Waterloo as we are in 100 weeks of the pandemic. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate you sending out some love on this Valentine's Day to our staff in a very difficult milestone or millstone that this has given us. And you're right. So many people inside City Hall and so many people in our community have done so well in their response to this pandemic. They've stepped up to do the right thing. They've helped their neighbor. They've gone into their jobs. They've done their jobs with their kids around their ankles. They've done so many difficult things that we didn't anticipate 2 years ago when we were sitting in these spaces. And while we're all tired, I think this is a good moment to pause, to reflect, to thank, and to send out some love to people who need it, your neighbors, your friends, your family, your colleagues, your work colleagues. And that is a good job for us to try to send those vibes out there today on this Valentine's Day. So that brings us to enactment of bylaws. I know that our resident lover of bylaws, Councillor Bodley, might wish to move the enactment of bylaws. And I see Councillor Veith seconding the enactment of bylaws. We will take a roll call vote, starting with Ward 1.
Councillor Hanmer in favor.
Bodily in favor.
Councillor Veith in favor.
Councillor Vasic in favor.
Mayor Jaworski in favor.
And the chair is in favor. We have now adjournment. Who would like to adjourn? I see Councillor Vasic would like to move to adjourn, and Councillor Bodley would like to second adjournment. We will start voting for adjournment with Councillor Hanmer.
Councillor Hanmer in favor.
Councillor Bodley in favor.
Councillor Veith in favor.
Councillor Vasic in favor.
Mayor Jaworski in favor.
And the chair is in favor as well. So we stand adjourned. I know we will see everybody back virtually in 2 weeks' time, and the mayor gets to sit in the big chair again. All right. Take care. Have a good Valentine's Day. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.